What's up, everybody? I'm Dave Glavin, aspiring NBA salary cap analyst, and today I'm going to be discussing the Atlanta Hawks, how they looked coming into this offseason, and where they are now. So, in the past four seasons since making the conference finals, they're 160 and 168, and they've only won three playoff games. Surprise runs to me are really dangerous because they convince you that you're better than you are. In that run, they beat the Julius Randle Knicks as well as the 76ers in what was the infamous Ben Simmons series. They did take Milwaukee, the eventual champs, to 6 games, but all of their losses were by double digits, so not that competitive of a series. That offseason, they re-signed Clint Capella, 2 years, $45 million. John Collins, 5 years, $125 million. And Kevin Herter to a 4 year, $65 million deal. And none of these guys really pushed the needle for them to be a sustainable contender. I'll talk a little bit about some of the organizational dysfunction that they've experienced during this time. But overall, they really have not been able to maximize Trae Young's ability. Although I do feel that this iteration that they're building right now is heading in the right direction. So coming into the offseason, they had 11 players under contract with 2 cap holds for their first-round picks at number 13, which they got by trading Kevin Herter to Sacramento, and number 22, which they got from the Lakers, but via the Dyson Daniels trade with New Orleans. They have plenty of money to spend, roughly $32.5 million below the tax. Their owner has never paid that in 10 seasons, so don't expect them to do so this year. But we'll get into kind of where they are now in relation to the tax. They did have 4 tradable first-round picks, depending on which years they chose to trade, but even or odd years. But they do have 4 tradable firsts and 5 tradable seconds, as well as access to the mid-level exception, the biennial exception, and a pretty solid trade exception that they generated by moving Bogdanovich at this past deadline. In terms of where they started this offseason, they moved on from GM Landry Fields, relieving him of his duties after 3 seasons, and they promoted assistant GM Onsi Salah to run the front office. Fields was really unable to elevate them from the middle of the pack, largely known for the Dejounte Murray trade, which was a real flop for them, not a good fit from the start. Did rebound a little bit by getting Dyson Daniels and 2 firsts for Dejounte, but overall was not the right leader for this group. Salah brings experience from San Antonio and Golden State, where I'm not sure there's 2 better places to learn how to build and sustain a winning culture than those 2. So definitely promising there. I think the question in Atlanta is, can they become a stable front office? That starts with the owner. Talked a lot about this in my previous video about the Celtics, but the most crucial aspect, in my opinion, in creating a successful long-term contender in pro sports, doesn't matter the sport, is having alignment from the top down. Ownership, front office, coaching staff, players. Everyone has to be on the same page about what the goal is, and there should only be one goal, and that's raising banners, right? They haven't had that with all the turnover at the top of the front office and a head coach in the past couple of years. But I do really like what I've heard about Salah and what he's talked about in the few press conferences that he's had about building a culture of high character and dynamic players in Atlanta. Speaking of dynamic players, first move that they made was on June 24th. They sent out Terrence Mann, the 22nd overall pick, George Niang, and the 2031 Cleveland second for Kristaps Porzingis, and a 2026 Boston second that has a bunch of conditions on it. I'm not sure they'll end up getting that, but overall, they're buying low. They're taking a swing on a guy who hasn't played over 70 games since his rookie year, but when healthy, there's very few people like him in the league. His two-way ability is desired by every team in the league, and I really don't think there's a better archetype of a big man to pair with Trae Young. At his best in Boston, I really feel like he was just as, if not more, impactful than Jaylen Brown at times. So I'm really excited to see him in Atlanta and rooting for good health for him. This deal does trigger a first apron hard cap because they're taking out more money than they sent out. Mann in the 22nd pick went to Brooklyn, while Niang in the 2031 Cleveland second went to Boston in what was a big salary clearing move for them. Their next move was moving back 10 spots in the draft from number 13 to 23 with New Orleans. They received the 2026 first. That's the most favorable of the Pelicans and the Bucks, which I believe is fantastic value for number 13. As soon as this trade happened, there was widespread praise in favor of Atlanta, and rightfully so. There is a lot riding on Derek Queen's development in terms of how this trade pans out for New Orleans. But while it is difficult to project future draft pick value, I think given the talent in the West and the uncertainty in Milwaukee regarding Giannis, this is a no-brainer for Atlanta. With that 23rd overall pick, they took Asa Newell out of Georgia, so right down the road from the Hawks. 6'11", 220 pounds, 19-year-old athletic power forward from Georgia. He averaged 15 and 7 for them. Interesting to see what his role will be in the NBA. To me, he's more of a 4 right now, but he doesn't have the ability to stretch the floor. I feel like he'll spend a lot of time in the G League, but he might be able to get some minutes next to Porzingis and Okongwu, given their shooting ability. Okongwu was a starter last year, shot 36% from 3, so a respectable percentage, but we'll see if that continues. Their next move was declining Dominic Barlow's team option for roughly $2.3 million. Really wasn't impactful for them at all. Hasn't really shown to be an impactful player at the NBA level yet so far in his career, but he did sign with Philadelphia on a 2-way as they try to find a 4 next to Embiid. On the 30th, their next big move was agreeing to a deal with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 4 years, $60.6 million. They sent out 2027 Cleveland second from the DeAndre Hunter trade and $1.5 million to Minnesota in that deal. He brings a skill set that every team values, similar to Porzingis, coming from a winning culture. Trae will almost always be playing next to Dyson or Nickeil, which is huge, given his defensive shortcomings. But locking him in at roughly 10% of the cap throughout his prime, I'm a big fan of that deal. They also signed Eli NJ, I believe is how you say his name, might be butchering that, but to a 2-way deal. He's an undersized center from Real Madrid, but I expect him to spend most of his time in the G League. Another sign and trade, this time sending someone out. Clint Capella signed with Houston, 3 years, $21 million deal. They also sent out Daquan Plowden to Phoenix, who was on a 2-way. They did receive a 2031 Houston second, $85,300, which conveniently enough is enough for the Exhibit 10 bonus, as well as 2-way player David Roddy, who they did waive the day after. Big win from this deal is generating a $6.7 million trade exception for an unrestricted free agent. So really good work being creative with someone you knew you weren't bringing back and getting some value. Yes, touched on that. Luke Kennard signed a 1-year, $11 million deal on July 8th. Really rounds out their main rotation. Maximizing Trae Young. That seems to be the theme of this offseason, as it should be. All-time great shooter. Really fits seamlessly wherever he plays. I think that's going to be no different here in Atlanta. This did come out of their mid-level exception, so they have a little bit over $3 million left of that if they want to spend it. Going to speed run a couple of their back-end roster moves here. Jacob Toppin and Keaton Wallace on 2-ways. They both played with College Park last season. Performed pretty well, so not surprised to see them back. They signed Nikola Jurisic, might be butchering that as well, but 2 years, $6 million deal. He did struggle with some of his efficiency last year with College Park, but he's a big guard, 6'8", so he has the frame to be impactful, but we'll see how he plays. Wouldn't be surprised to see him crack the rotation. They also signed N'Faly Dante to a 2-year, $4.5 million deal that Houston declined to match. Really strong G League player to fill that third center spot. He was top 6 in blocks and rebounds, and he shot 75% from the field. So signed him to fill the third center spot. And they have a couple of Exhibit 10s battling for the last roster spot. You got 2 wings, Caleb Houston and Kobe Johnson. Kobe Johnson is my pick for this last spot. He's the younger brother of Jalen Johnson. Showed some solid 2-way potential at UCLA. And Houston just really hasn't been consistent enough of a shooter, in my opinion, to merit that spot. Looking at their post off-season finances, they're roughly $3.5 million below the tax with one open roster spot. They do still have 4 tradable firsts and 3 tradable seconds, depending on what years they choose for the first. They're roughly $11.5 million below that first apron hard cap that was triggered by the Porzingis deal. It also would have been triggered by acquiring Nickeil Alexander-Walker via sign and trade. But I don't think this team is going to be taxpayers yet. But I do think this group ends up with home court advantage in the playoffs, given where the East is. And I do really like what they're building around Trae in terms of having the length and the shooting to make up for his shortcomings and really maximize his ability as a passer. I want to talk about some upcoming extensions, starting with Trae Young. I don't think anything happens during the season, but they have until the 29th of June to make a decision, as he has a player option for the season after this upcoming season. Given what they've built around him, I really feel like this is a make or break year for him in Atlanta. When you take a look at potential extensions, the sentiment around the league is that he's not a 30% max player still. He did receive that for his first deal. It was triggered on his rookie scale for making All-NBA. But I do really feel like he's almost underrated at this point when it comes to how powerful of an offensive engine he is. I don't think he's been utilized effectively enough. He definitely has defensive shortcomings, but he's improved on that end. He's no longer, he used to be the worst defender in the league. He is no longer in that tier, but he can only be so good as an undersized guard. I feel like when you take a look at the 5 guys that have recently got this 30% max, Donovan Mitchell, he's a better player. But Laurie, Jamal, and Bam stand out to me as guys that Trae is just as good as. And Luka most recently got this extension, obviously more talented. But another option for him is a 28.5% of the cap max. I personally don't think he would sign this. I feel like someone out there would give him the 30, and I think he's worthy of the 30. He belongs in that group. This does save them roughly $8 million over the whole course of the contract. But regardless of what percentage of the cap he gets, I do think it'll be a similar structure to Luka in the 2+1, so that he can get 10 years of service and be eligible for the 35% max. In terms of another extension candidate, Kristaps Porzingis' recent acquisition, he's not eligible to get the extension that he would want until January 6th, 6 months from his trade date. But last season, he battled this weird illness that really impacted his game. I think 12% of the cap is a fair assessment for him, a decreasing structure to help Atlanta a little bit, but a guaranteed $40 million, given his injury history, I think is somewhere that they could find an agreement on, find commonality on. But we'll see if they end up waiting till the end of the season to extend him. But I don't think you give up that much just to have him be a one-year rental. I think there's a plan for him to be there for multiple years. Dyson Daniels, also entering the last year of his contract, really emerged last year as an impactful defender and improved offensively. Top 3 for Defensive Player of the Year, won Most Improved Player, first team All Defense on a rookie deal. So I think he's really intriguing to me, given how much his value has skyrocketed. I'm not even sure what. I'm actually positive they wouldn't trade him straight up for Dejounte Murray at this point. So it's crazy that they were able to get him and 2 first-round picks for Dejounte Murray. He's a perfect complement to Trae. I suggest a 4-year, $130.5 million deal, roughly, player option in year 4 here. Starts at 17.5% of the cap, slightly above deals that Trey Murphy and Jaden McDaniels got, as well as Jabari Smith Jr. Suggs, I did want to compare. I believe I had that here. Yes, that should be here as well. Suggs got 22% of the cap in year 1, but it decreases to 12 by the end of the contract. So I think on a 4-year deal, 17.5 is fair. He would be set to expire the same year as Jalen Johnson. So maybe that's a route they don't want to take, have both of those guys expiring at the same time, and they push for the 5-year. But I do think 17.5 in terms of percentage of the cap is fair for him. Don't think he's at the 20% level unless he sees another improvement on the offensive end. If Trae gets the max, which we have here, and those other two guys get this rough 17.5% and 12%, they'll still have roughly $8 million to play with below the tax, as well as the ability to open up at least another 10 in terms of options and non-guaranteed money if they don't want to bring that back. When you take a look at their projected rotation, for every team I've done this with, this is just an estimate to try to see where minutes will be distributed. I don't think that this is an exact science by any means, but it's more for me to try to see what are they replacing and who's going to get more minutes, where do they need the most help in terms of their depth. I think one thing that stands out to me is a backup point guard. I know Nikhil can handle the ball, but he's not really a primary distributor. So interested to see how they handle that. Other than that, these are the 9 that I feel like would be like their playoff rotation. Trae, Jalen, Dyson, Kristaps, Risache, who I think has played really well in Eurobasket. I'm interested to see his year 2. Nikhil, Onyeka, Luke, and Muhammad. But overall, that is the Atlanta Hawks salary cap analysis. I appreciate anyone who's tuned in. We'll be back with another video soon. Thank you.